It's one of my favorite times of the year when Big 12 coaches start talking smack anonymously about each other. Let's get to it. I'm Pete Mundo, Heartland College Sports. We cover the Big 12 Conference. We appreciate you being here as a part of the show. As always, hit that subscribe button on YouTube and on the podcast. And we always appreciate our radio affiliates being here as a part of the show. So, Athlon Sports, which does a great preview magazine, one of the best alongside Phil Steele, who we're big fans of here on the show. And they do one of the great things of the offseason. They get quotes anonymously from coaches about other teams in the conference. It's absolutely outstanding. And I want to go through some of these for the Big 12 and react to some of these anonymous quotes from Big 12 coaches about other Big 12 teams, because it's just fascinating stuff. I want to start with the biggest storyline coming out of this deal, and it's Colorado. The quotes about Colorado are exactly what you would expect. One coach saying anonymously about Colorado, it's going to be a circus just like last season, so expect the unexpected. Coach is right. He's right. It's going to be a circus. Now, that's not necessarily an insult, right? Circuses can be wildly entertaining. Circuses can be a lot of fun to watch, but it also can mean something completely different. It can be, a total clown show. It just depends how the circus plays out. Colorado is going to be a circus. It is probably also going to be the most watched team on a viewership basis in the entire Big 12, and that's because of Coach Prime and Deion Sanders. So the Big 12 should embrace the circus and ride the circus. But yes, it's going to be a circus. Other anonymous quotes from Big 12 coaches. The known quantity is at quarterback. When you look at the kid, Shedeur Sanders, away from the hype and his dad, he can make legit throws and has innate talent and great instincts. Another coach saying, it doesn't matter what noise Prime makes. They cannot have a winning season without a functional run game and a legit offensive line. That's the one position group you can't really portal in one cycle. If they're halfway better there, they'll have a winning season. And that's what I've said about Colorado. If they're halfway better on the offensive line than they were last year, which was horrific, they can have a winning season and they can be in the Big 12 title hunt entering November because of the great skill position talent they have. Now, there's not a lot of depth. If some of their key guys go down, they're in trouble. But there's an easy case to make, and we talked about this last week with Andy Staples, which you should watch on YouTube or the podcast if you haven't yet. We talked about how we both believe in the idea that in a perfect scenario, Colorado can find itself competing for a spot in the Big 12 championship game over the final 2-3 weeks of the regular season. That's not a stretch. So those are some of the anonymous quotes about Colorado. Let's go back to the top of the list and go down this thing alphabetically. Arizona. The most intriguing anonymous coaching quote about Arizona is this one. They could really shock some people, and they're definitely a sleeper team to look out for. Another coach saying, it's hard to think of a better roster for a first-year, first-time Power 4 head coach. Brent Brennan, proven winner at a program, San Jose State, where it's really hard to sustain winning. There's no doubt that Coach Brennan's walked into a nearly perfect situation for a guy transitioning to the Power 4 for the first time and then having to also move to a new conference from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. But you've got a lot of the pieces that you would want. They were able to maintain most of their key guys after Jed Fish bolted. So that's good in Arizona. But here's the thing. I don't think they're a sleeper. Like, when I look at the top of the Big 12, I see Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas State in my top three. And after that, I'm probably putting Arizona right there in that top four teams that would not shock me if they were competing and playing in a Big 12 championship game come December. So I don't even view them as a sleeper. I think the only people that might view Arizona as a sleeper team are those who are not as familiar with the program. Maybe like old school Big 12 fans who have not watched a lot of Arizona and just see that Jed Fish is gone and there's no hope for them. But I don't see it that way at all. I think that this team is going to be very much in contention for a spot in the Big 12 championship game come the end of November. Arizona State. Not a lot of great things being said about Arizona State. Here's one anonymous quote. You can understand Kenny Dillingham's vision, but it's still a ways on down the road. They lost quarterback Jaden Rashada and two of his best targets in spring ball. That's not great, but you can't claim you're surprised by losing that quarterback. He's operated like a free agent since he got to the college level. Another coach saying this is a long-term rebuild now with more reduced scholarships after the Herm Edwards stuff. There's some good pieces here, but still an uphill battle, and will be until they can create some consistency and start selling success. Not a lot of great things being said about Arizona State, and I am not shocked by that at all. They will finish near the bottom of the Big 12 conference. Baylor. Some anonymous quotes about Baylor coming from Athlon Sports. Quote, it seems like Dave Aranda knows that the heat is on with the changes they made on offense. They're back to the air raid Texas-style offensive football. It's all in on Toledo transfer quarterback DeQuan Finn at quarterback. The receivers were not great last season. They need to fix that and the offensive line. Another coach saying, defensively, they're going back to Aranda calling it. They were bland last year, really predictable, and they could not generate any pressure. Lastly, the question we asked when Aranda got hired was whether or not he could build out a Texas recruiting staff. The overall talent level is starting to answer that question. Coaches are not high on what's going on with Dave Aranda at Baylor. You got to give Matt Rule a lot of credit. Matt Rule had no ties to Texas when he got that job. He hired a bunch of Texas high school studs, including the now head coach at Texas Tech, Joey McGuire. And it worked out beautifully. He said, I don't know the Texas high school football scene. I need to know it. So let me bring in guys who know it. And it worked. And they went from one win in year one under Matt Rule to getting to a Big 12 championship game. But we don't really have the returns yet on whether or not Dave Aranda running the program can do it, because when he had that great year, that was still mostly a bunch of Matt Rule guys, right? So he had a big bounce back from year one to year two, but there were still a lot of Rule guys on that team. So the jury, it sounds like, is still very much out around the Big 12 on what kind of program Dave Aranda can build there at Baylor. BYU. Here's the most interesting quote from an anonymous head coach on BYU. Last year was a good example of a transition to Power 5 or 4 football. You run out of steam. You don't have the depth, and you can't plug guys in after injuries. They should be better down the stretch this season. And I thought about that, and I said to myself, you know what? It's actually a great point, because BYU, we understand how the program is set up. We understand some of the inherent challenges that come with running a program like BYU. All that is indisputably true. We've had those conversations before, right? But now, when you actually go back and look at last season, I mean, the way they went down the stretch last season, they lost their last 5 games, and a lot of them were ugly. Texas 35-6, West Virginia 37-7, Iowa State 45-13. They kept it close in the last 2. They lost to OU by 7, Oklahoma State by 6. But yeah, it was ugly down the stretch for the most part, with 5 straight losses and 6 of their last 7 games. So the depth has to get better, and that does not happen overnight at a place like BYU. We understand that doesn't happen at a place like BYU. Next up, Cincinnati. No coaches anonymously giving Athlon Sports really anything positive about what's going on at Cincinnati and these anonymous head coaches' quotes. Here are a couple of the quotes. The debut season was basically a disaster for them. Another coach. Cincinnati lacked identity on both sides of the ball. They did not have outstanding skill pieces. It just looked messy all around. They're trying to rebuild the roster, and Scott Satterfield can recruit, but it's an issue where they never really reached their potential at Louisville. And this is a very similar job. All those things are true. The Scott Satterfield hire felt so weird because the guy never reached his potential at Louisville. And then he gets hired for a very similar job at a place he just was, where he never reached the ceiling of what the program can be. We've seen Louisville have far more success than it ever had under Scott Satterfield, and he got the job at Cincinnati. It felt like a rushed hire at the time, and certainly the year one returns are not good. And there's nothing that I can look to and suggest year two is going to be significantly better. One coach did say about Cincinnati, quote, "This has always been a job with a high ceiling for coaches who understand it." That's a high compliment. Very high compliment. Houston, speaking of high compliments, a lot of people very high on where Houston's going under Willie Fritz compared to Dana Holgorsen. One coach saying here to Athlon Sports, hiring Willie Fritz makes so much more sense for the program. Fritz is the ultimate steady hand, consistent, hard-nosed football coach. And he's finally getting a job where they really want to support the program at the top level. All of those things are not traits you would use to describe Dana Holgorsen. You would not say that Dana Holgorsen is the ultimate steady hand. You would not say Dana Holgorsen is consistent. You would not say Dana Holgorsen is a hard-nosed football coach. He is mostly none of those things, with all due respect. I think he's entertaining. I think he's a great offensive mind. I liked it when he would take off his cap and, put his hand through his hair and, sweating bullets and the whole deal. But he was none of those things. Willie Fritz is all of those things. Tremendous respect. He's not a spring chicken, but that's not what Houston needs right now. Willie Fritz can be to Houston what Lance Leipold has been to Kansas. If everything hits, and frankly, with the amount of talent in his own backyard, it's 20 times, 100 times what Lance Leipold's got in his backyard at KU. The resources are there. Another coach saying Sheil Wood, the defensive coordinator at Houston, is going to be a head coach soon. They built a really great staff, expect a lot of the Tulane 3-4. So people are very high on Willie Fritz. Now, Iowa State, interesting quotes on Iowa State in the Athlon Sports anonymous quotes off-season content, which some of the best work Athlon Sports does. By the way, I'm Pete Mundo. We're Heartland College Sports. You're just joining us here right now on YouTube or on the podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up button on the video. We so appreciate you being here and doing that. Iowa State, what are coaches saying about Iowa State? One, this is interesting. This will be a really telling season for Matt Campbell. Can he rebuild that program in the portal and NIL era? A few years ago, it seemed like his name was out there for every job, and then they fell back to earth. Another coach saying about Iowa State, their issues are talent-based, not scheme, not culture. They don't have the guys they need year in, year out. Are they going to change and adapt to the transfer world? Can you still win a league like ours, meaning the Big 12, just relying on the recruit and develop system? They added a few pieces this year, so maybe they're changing things up. I looked this up. Iowa State added 7 transfers this offseason. That is the fewest in the Big 12. Now, a couple of teams only had 1 or 2 more. BYU had 9 transfers come in. Oklahoma State only had 8. But Iowa State had the fewest. Matt Campbell still has an old school approach to building a football program. And we're going to find out this year whether or not that can still work. I believe it's the only way for it to work at a place like Iowa State. Iowa State cannot be a 20 in, 20 out portal team. That's just not who they're going to be, especially under Matt Campbell. But this is the year when Iowa State should pop with this group. You've been through some of that, the growing pains and the post-Brock Purdy, Breece Hall era. Now it's time to pop. But you look at it, like Kansas State's a very similar program to Iowa State in the sense of what is a reasonable expectation. Historically, of course, Kansas State's been a better program, but you get the point. There's similarities there. Kansas State has used the portal more than Iowa State. Not a lot more, but more. Kansas State's had 10, 11 transfers come in. Iowa State's only at 7. Now, it's not a huge number, but if you're targeted about it, that's still a 30, 40% difference. that matters. So Matt Campbell is really putting his style to the test this year. He's still Matt Campbell. He's going to walk on water there at Ames for a very long time. But this is a fascinating year for a program builder like Matt Campbell, who has kind of stuck to the old ways in large part. Not that he hasn't embraced it. He has a little bit. But of all the ways this sport has changed in the last couple of years, Campbell has done his best to hang on to what he's got. And we'll see the dividends that pays off and whether or not those pay off dividends here in the 2024 college football season. It's going to be a lot of fun to follow. Kansas, anonymous head coach is saying about Kansas. The school locking down Lance Leipold is the biggest move of the entire offseason. At that program from where it started, that is nothing short of amazing. The coaching staff has created one of the greatest turnaround stories in college football. Yeah, that is so true. It is unbelievable what Lance Leipold has done in this very short window at Kansas, and nobody in a million years saw it coming. Also, here an anonymous quote, Jalen Daniels is a proven talent at quarterback. They have some great running backs. This is a season where they should be considered a Big 12 title contender. They have depth, experience, and talent. That is all true. But here are the two things that are getting overlooked about KU. One, Jalen Daniels' health. Are you going to bet on Jalen Daniels' health? I'm not. No way. The guy is brittle. I am not betting on Jalen Daniels' health to get through an entire season. In fact, I don't think Jalen Daniels will get through the entire season. I'm just playing the odds here. I don't think he can do it. And on top of that, all their home games are at either Arrowhead Stadium where the Chiefs play or the Sporting Kansas City MLS Stadium. They don't have any games on campus. And while they're still home games, I believe it still matters. It still is not going to be a true home game in your locker room on your campus. And that makes a difference. I don't think that should just be swept under the rug and these should be viewed at as true home games. They're more like neutral site games where, yes, it'll mostly be your fan base, but how many other fan bases might be like, you know what, let's go to Arrowhead Stadium. We can't get there for a Chiefs game, but let's take in Arrowhead Stadium. That'll be cool. And you might end up with a larger percentage of opposing fans than you would had that game been in Lawrence on campus. And that's just something that in a coin flip league like the Big 12 should not be overlooked. But they do have, per the experts, one of the easiest schedules in the country at the Power 4 level. So that's worth watching. Some of the other anonymous quotes. We've got still Kansas State. Let's go to theirs. One coach saying about Kansas State, losing Colin Klein's a big deal, but Matt Wells has a ton of experience. Absolutely. Another coach saying Chris Kleiman's done a fantastic job blending the reality of recruiting and the portal to the Kansas State identity. They're still great at developing talent and finding those hidden players. They're out fighting for stars too. Chris Kleiman may have done the most underrated job in the offseason in the Big 12. With the portal, with guys like Dylan Edwards, with keeping stars like Avery Johnson after Colin Klein leaves. I know Kansas State fans appreciate it, but do they really appreciate it at the level that they should? They could be right now going into a season with neither of these two guys. They've got both. And they are poised to be at the top of the Big 12 conference when all is said and done, which comes just a couple of years after they won the Big 12 conference and knocked off, a TCU team that obviously had itself an incredible season and got itself to a national championship. Do we really appreciate Chris Kleiman like we should? And the guy's not going anywhere, by the way. That's the other great part about his story and great part for the Big 12. All right. Oklahoma State. Anonymous coaching quote. Some guys were writing off Mike Gundy for dead last season, but he's a hell of a coach. They gutted their way through that one. Also, a coach saying the running back, Ollie Gordon, is an absolute stud, maybe a Heisman guy. Quarterback Alan Bowman's a vet. Alan Bowman's not a vet. Alan Bowman's getting ready for the nursing home. My good, how old is Alan Bowman, for crying out loud? He's got to be pushing 20. Yeah, Alan Bowman's going to be 25 next March. Excuse me. I'm losing it. I would have guessed he was 23. Oh, my gosh. Alan Bowman is going to be pushing a quarter-century crisis, going up against guys whose stones have just dropped. Holy jeez. I mean, I knew he was old, but gosh, now you worry about the injuries because he's an old man, not because he's brittle. Holy jeez. So, okay. All right. Don't get me wrong. Oklahoma State's going to be up there. But for the Cowboys, the offense is there. The question is going to come down to how much better the defense can be as to whether or not they are in the conference title race going into the end of the season. I think they can get it, but coaches obviously are pretty high on Mike Gundy and how year in, year out, people doubt him. And he is just able to continue to put together winning team after winning team after winning team. And you want to talk about fan bases that I think probably don't appreciate the guy they've got running the program? To Oklahoma State fans and Mike Gundy. And Andy Staples talked about this on our show last week, which, once again, if you haven't seen it, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll see Andy Staples on the show last week. And he talked a lot about how Oklahoma State fans have it so damn good. All right, we got a few teams left here on the anonymous quotes. We got 4 more to run through. TCU. Here are some of the anonymous quotes about TCU. This one really stood out to me. The truth about Sonny Dykes is that they weren't as good as the 2022 team that reached the national championship, and the program's not as bad as the 23 season. The truth is closer to what they'll do this season when the roster really belongs to this staff. And that's a great way to put it. Did they catch a couple of breaks in 22? Absolutely. But guess what? Any coach that gets to a national championship game is going to catch a couple of breaks. That's indisputable. The question now becomes, after a national championship run to a missed bowl season, what's coming up this year? And the one thing that stood out to me, and we talked to Sonny Dykes on this show a couple of weeks ago, also on the YouTube channel, just find it, subscribe to the channel, you'll find it from a couple of weeks ago. And he felt like last year he never had that team. He felt like there was a lot of entitlement coming out the national championship. Guys maybe lost their edge, and he knew it right away. And he's cognizant of that this year. And that's going to make a big difference. And I think Sonny Dykes likes being in the spot that he's in, where he's getting overlooked. He's not getting as much attention. He wants a chip on the shoulder. And if it's playing off and playing well this offseason, it will play into the regular season. And that's exactly where he wants this team to be, under the radar. No doubt about it. Texas Tech. I would say anonymously to Athlon Sports, coaches are lukewarm on Texas Tech. Here's the one that stood out to me about Texas Tech. This season's going to test the staff's ability to develop their young guys. It's year 3, so all the hype about being better tied with Texas high schools has to start showing up. And that's fair. Joey McGuire's appeal was that he was a guy who knew the high school recruiting scene as well as anybody, and that was going to pay enormous dividends on the recruiting trail. Well, if you're going into year 3, that's got to start showing up in large part, right? You've got to start seeing the return on that at a place like Texas Tech, because that's a big selling point. Tech's kind of been middle of the pack. They haven't been big on the portal. They haven't overused it. They haven't underused it. They had 16 guys come in through the portal. They had 23 leave via the portal. So they're right in the middle of the pack. Doesn't really affect them in a major way either way. But now's that year where you say, okay, if we're going to see that program build under a guy like Joey McGuire, you got to start feeling like it's trending in the right direction, and it's getting there now at Texas Tech. That is not unreasonable to expect. All right? So, by the way, leave your comments on the show. YouTube, of course, is a great place to find us and leave those comments during the show. On top of that, speaking of comments, man, the Heartland College Sports forums are going bonkers. We need a lot of new fan bases on there right now. We've had a huge influx of Utah, BYU fans coming in. We've got folks representing UCF, a lot of UCF fans coming in. But if you're a Big 12 fan and you're watching right now and you want to have a civil fun, in-depth discussion with a lot of different Big 12 fans. It's happening at heartlandcollegesports.com on our forums. So just click on the forums tab at the top of the page. Sign up. It's free. We're not asking you for anything. Just have a good time. I'm on there all the time, and it's been so fun the last bunch of weeks especially to see those forums really grow, and it's been civil. I'm in there all day. I'm monitoring that forum all day at heartlandcollegesports.com. And I'm enjoying getting to know a lot of new fans. So please do sign up and subscribe and check it out if you haven't yet. We have a lot of fan bases that still are not represented on there. So get on there and sign up and get a bunch of your friends and family on there as well. We'll be doing some fun things on those forums during the football season. Anonymous quotes on UCF. Let's go to UCF. This is the one I like. They're getting better and better in recruiting. Gus Malzahn has given them what the administration built for a long time, that real shot at being another power team in the state of Florida. They've upped their game in every single way. Speaking of the Heartland College Sports forums, this question came up on the forums. And it was, if you were buying stock over the next 5 years in college football, would you buy UCF stock or Miami stock? I would buy UCF stock. It's a no-brainer. And by the way, I don't know who would buy Miami stock and why. You don't know where the program's headed under Mario Cristobal. You don't know where the conference is headed, meaning the ACC, and what that looks like. Take off the history of Miami. And how could you possibly convince me you'd take Miami over UCF over the next 5 years based on what? History doesn't matter. It's meaningless for the most part, especially when the history predates the birthday of most of the guys who are getting recruited right now. So this was on the message boards, and the reason we were talking about this on the message boards is because, with all the drama in the ACC, we were like, all right, if you had to add teams from the ACC, who would you add? And everybody agreed on Pitt and Virginia Tech. And then you're saying, okay, what's 3 and 4? Is it NC State? Is it Louisville? Is it Miami? And it's amazing how many of us were like, on Miami, maybe. And it made me realize, and this became a conversation on the forums, why would you buy Miami stock over UCF stock the next 5 years? I wouldn't. If UCF got a couple plays, a couple of bounces their way last year, they would be a hot pick going into 2024. But bad Baylor loss, rough Oklahoma loss, couple of very close losses that went towards their opponents last year as they transitioned to the Big 12. They should be a hot offseason pick. And if they had won another game or two, they would be. But they didn't. Meantime, now you got a guy like KJ Jefferson, who is a perfect fit for Gus Malzahn's system. I mean, it's not Cam Newton, but you're not going to find Cam Newton. KJ Jefferson is it. Dude's a stud. And do not sleep on UCF. You would be very foolish to sleep on UCF this year in the Big 12 Conference. Utah. Here are some of the anonymous quotes to Athlon Sports about Utah. If you had to pick one program coming in from the Pac-12 as a legit contender, it's definitely these guys on day one. They're replacing a lot of guys in the wide receiver group in the secondary, but the system and culture there is so steady. No doubt about it. Another coach saying, if Cameron Rising is back and healthy all season, they've got a legit shot at a first-year Big 12 title. Yeah, none of those things I'm denying for a second. All of those things are entirely accurate and entirely true. They can be a team that walks into the Big 12 and wins the conference. And I know a lot of us in Big 12 land are not going to be happy about that. Not because we don't like Utah, but let's be honest. There's been a lot of loud, braggadocious Utah fans. Now, they're not the ones on the forums, by the way. The ones in the forums we've met have been really great Utah fans. They denounce some of the goofballs on social media. But there's a certain air of confidence that a lot of us from the old Big 12 feel like, guys, can you bring that confidence down just a little bit, just like that much for us, please? That's what a lot of us want to see at Utah. Just like, bring it in just a little bit. Come on. And they won't do it. So I think Utah's going to be in the mix. I really do. I think the home field's tremendous as far as I can tell. It's on my bucket list of places to go and things to do, with these new Big 12 teams in the mix now. But, man, I am so intrigued to see that Utah, Oklahoma State game in Stillwater in September. The winner of that game is in the driver's seat to get to Arlington for the Big 12 championship early in the season. Last but not least, West Virginia. Anonymous coaching quotes to Athlon Sports. Neil Brown is fantastic as a program manager. Never really showed any of the strain from the hot seat. That's true. Another coach saying, a lot of the freshmen last year could really break out this year. Another very good point. Another coach saying about Neil Brown in West Virginia, it's hard to tell how much they've turned the corner. A lot of that depends on if they can help Garrett Green elevate. He could be a top quarterback in the nation if there's support around him. Not only that, but we had Neil Brown on the show about a month ago. Another show you got to listen to and watch on the YouTube and podcast. And here's what he noted about Garrett Green. And he's right about this. If you go back and watch West Virginia film, they asked a lot of Garrett Green getting the ball down the field. And the reality is he was put and asked to make some throws that are low percentage throws. And it sounded to me in talking to Neil Brown that he was going to rein some of that in. And he was going to put Garrett Green in a position to make some easier throws as the game progressed. And if that does happen, then Garrett Green is going to pop. And Garrett Green is going to surprise a lot of people going into 2024. A lot of people are not going to see it coming. They're going to think about, the running backs, maybe the best 1-2 punch in the Big 12. They're going to think about an O-line, defense, but Garrett Green is undersized, but he should not be overlooked. I'll leave it at that. So those are some of the anonymous quotes from around the Big 12 Conference. One of the great things done by Athlon Sports. All the credit to them in getting those quotes. I love reading through them every single year. I'm Pete Mundo. We are Heartland College Sports. Thank you guys for being here on the show. Head on over to our forum. Sign up there. We'd love to see you interacting with other Big 12 and college football fans as those forums just keep growing every single day. It's been a lot of fun to see and get to know a lot of you guys as well. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that thumbs up right below the video on YouTube. And, of course, subscribe to the podcast. Leave that 5-star rating and review. It makes a difference. No matter what you tell yourself, it makes a difference. Thank you guys for being here. As some of you were saying on the text line, let's get the season started already. The anticipation's killing all of us. I know, but we got 2.5 months to go, and we're going to be here for you multiple nights a week right here on Heartland College Sports. Have a great day. Go Big 12. I'm Pete Mundo, and we'll talk to you soon.